Hello and welcome to the Backpacking Light tarp video. Now, using a tarp is great fun. They're very simple rectangular pieces of material, which of course means they're extremely light, considerably lighter than taking a tent, and pitched in the right way they will give you lots of coverage, lots of protection and lots of ventilation. But people sometimes get concerned or confused about how to pitch a tarp correctly, what knots to use and what shape a tarp should take. So in this video, what we've done is taken the three main tarp configurations, and I'm quickly going to introduce you to them now, and then we'll come back and look at them in more detail in a moment. Now this is the A-frame configuration, and you can see where it gets its name from. It's probably the configuration that most people would recognise straight away from reading the books or television programmes such as Ray Mears and so on. Now, this configuration works beautifully when the weather isn't too intense. You've got plenty of ventilation all around you, you can cook underneath here, you can prepare your stuff underneath here, and in fact, to give you an idea, this is an 8 foot by 6 foot tarp, and you'd get 2 people underneath here with their equipment, no problems at all. As you can see, if the weather changes slightly, you can perhaps lift one side or lift the other. The choice is yours. But this is the standard A-frame configuration that we'll be coming back and looking at in a while. Now let's go and have a look at the lean-to. Now for me, the whole idea of using a tarp has become part of the environment. It takes a while, admittedly, to get used to sleeping in the open, as it were, so that when you open your eyes at any time, you see the sky. But once you get used to that, it's a wonderful feeling. The lean-to configuration gives you a certain amount of protection from one side from the weather, but I've got maximum views and obviously still plenty of ventilation, so I can do my cooking and sort all my equipment out underneath here. The Backpacking Light Solo tarp, this particular tarp, is 9 foot long by 4.5 foot. And that gives me plenty of space to either lie out long ways, should I wish to, or lie out sideways, as it were, and I can then make the most use of the space. One of the most enjoyable things about using a tarp in any configuration is the entertainment. Usually you get to see wildlife that you would not normally see because you zip the tent door closed. You get to see stars at night, which perform the most amazing nighttime entertainment. And then when you get bored with that, you close your eyes, and when you open them again, you see the sunrise. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Anyway, so that's the A-frame and the lean-to. Now let's have a quick look at the Flying V or the Flying Diamond. And this is the Backpacking Light Micro Tarp. Now you might think this is a little bit on the small side, but it does everything that I need it to do. If you can imagine, I've got my body in a bivvy bag here, which is sticking out. This particular shape will give me plenty of coverage. It will shed the weather very easily from any angle at the back here. And I've got plenty of space to store my rucksack, boots, whatever it might have, plus a space here to do some cooking while I watch the entertainment. Now, the Flying V, the Flying Diamond configuration can be made with any size tarp. And certainly when you start getting into the bigger 10 foot by 8 foot tarps, it's a copious amount of space for several people very easily. So that's the three main configurations, the A-frame, the lean-to and the Flying V. The first question people usually ask is, what knots do I use? So what we're going to do now is look at the best knots to use, how to tie them and where to put them.
When you go tarping for the first time, the temptation is to take a long reel of cord with you and cut it to length as you need it. Now, unless you put it away neatly at the end of that trip, this can result in endless spaghetti coming out of the bag the next time you use the tarp, and it isn't advisable on a windy day when you may need it in a hurry. It generally isn't a good idea either to leave cord loosely tied to your tarp, as it will never dry and once again can be a tangled mess when you pull it from the bag. After all, it may not suit your next configuration, so you could end up wasting time sitting in the rain and tying knots and tangles before you start. And this is the reason at the end of each use of your tarp you should hank your cordage, so it's neat, tidy and ready for next time.
Now, as we've already said, the advantage of hanked cordage is the fact that it will come apart very easily, and it comes apart ready for use with no tangles. And you can actually leave it attached to your tarp should you wish to do so once you've got a regular shape that you like to use, and hank the cordage back to the tarp. So if you like, that would be hanging off the tarp like this. You come to use it, you pull the tail end, bingo, away it all comes, beautiful. So how do you hank cordage? Well, it's fairly simple. You lock the first piece there between your thumb and forefinger. You take the next piece and put it between your third and little finger, fourth finger, and then you basically do a figure of 8 between the two, and nice and steady. You try and sort of keep it one building up on top of the other, but it doesn't really matter if it goes below the edge that you're working, because it all comes apart nice and easy. And then build this figure of 8 up, as I say, not too tight, and at the same time not really floppy, until you get to the tail end. As you can see there, it's a very short tail end, and I like to work with something a bit longer if I can, because I've got to wind this round here. So I loosen off probably about, I don't know, 8 inches there, 10 inches of cord. I lock it with my forefinger, slide it off with off my little finger, just grip it there and change my grip. So my grip now is holding it with my left hand like that, with the tail here. And then I turn it round once and lock it. Now you lock it by crossing over the turn there. And then I go back, continue turning to the right. As you'll notice there, each turn is to the right of that turn, until I get down to the last couple of inches, which is fine, which is what I want. Now, the first bit that you had tucked between your thumb and forefinger is here. You pull that and one of these loops will reduce. There you go, you can see it, there's that loop there. And that is my locking loop. And all I do is take the tail of the cord, slide a loop through the locking loop like that, and pull this down until it just starts to pull it under the turns. Now I don't actually pull it very far under the turns, because that would actually be pulling it through. It's just enough to pull it underneath there, and as you can see, that's nice and taut. And so that's not going to come loose in the bag, but as soon as you need it, you just hold that end and that end and pull the two apart, and bingo, it all comes apart again. And that is how to hank cordage.
When using a stick or walking pole as a support or lifter, it is tempting just to wind the cord a few times around the pole and peg it out. Although this will hold for a short while, wind movement through the night will loosen the turns, and eventually the coils will slip and the tension will be lost. Of course, the pole will fall. What is needed is a hitch which will lock against itself and hold firmly in place. This way it won't come undone under pressure or slide down the pole. The clove hitch is the answer, which is simply applied with a couple of turns to the cord.
Right, we'll first show you how to tie a clove hitch, what it should look like, and then I'll show you the quick method, which is actually much more useful than this traditional way. Taking the end of the cord here, you go once over your pole or stick and turn it to the right. You cross it over, that's the locking part there, and go round it to the left, and then you slide it under this loop here, like so, like that, and that is what a clove hitch looks like. Obviously condensed down looks a lot neater than that. Now that's fine if you've got it at the end of your cord here, but actually we don't want to use it at the end of the cord. We want to use it somewhere in the middle of the cord, because it makes a great support for tarp, or even for when you're camping. So let's just take that off there. Move the stick out of the way and bring in our walking pole. So there. Now let's assume that that's a walking pole. We've got one end of the cord attached to our tarp. The other end we're going to attach to a peg, and we're using the pole here to lift the tarp up, to lift the edge of the tarp up, or whatever it might be. It could even be the doorway to your tent, and you're wanting to keep the doorway open so you can get some air through and also do some cooking with the windbreak. So if that's our pole there, in the middle of the cord, the length of cord here, it's quite simple. What you do is you turn once to your left over the top and hold it like that. You do the second time over the top to your left and hold it like that. You then put the second loop underneath the first loop and drop it over the top of your pole. And there you have it. There you go, a perfect clove hitch. and that won't move, twist or whatever. Even on a smooth surface like this will just lock tight. With pressure on both sides of the cord, that will lock tight and it will not slide. So even using a polished or a slippery surface, like for example a walking pole, you'll find that actually that'll grip quite nicely and keep your tarp lifted. So that's the tip and the best way of using a clove hitch. Okay, the slippery clove hitch is a variation of the clove hitch, which is, I found, to be the most perfect knot for tying cord to a tarp and removing it very quickly, no matter how tight or wet it's become. It's the same clove hitch shape, so as before, over to the right, cross over to the left, underneath, and then instead of sticking the tail, poking the tail through there like that, you actually put through a loop like this, and that is the slippery part of the knot. Any knot which is a quick removable knot is called a slippery knot. And then to remove it, you just pull that and the whole thing comes apart. Now what we do is replace this bar for the cord which is going down to the peg of the tarp. So let's take that out and actually bring a corner of a tarp in. So there you have it. So let's bring that through. This in my right hand is the one that's going down to the peg, and my left hand is the one we're tying the knot with. That then sits over the top of the cord there, round to the right, crosses over, goes underneath, and then rather than putting the tail all the way through there, which would be a complete clove hitch, we make it a slippery clove hitch by putting a loop through there like that, and then that will slide down and make it nice and fast against the tab there. So that'll hold quite nicely no matter the weather and no matter how wet or how much tension's put on it. And then to remove it, and you want to pack up in the morning, you just pull the slippery part through, then the whole thing just comes straight out like that. And it doesn't matter whether it's wet or dry, that will quick release and come straight out of the tarp tab. And I haven't found a similar knot that is as easy as that to use and as quick to tie and as easy to untie. So that's the slippery clove hitch. Right, let's move on to the slippery adjustable loop, or the guy knot, as that's how we're going to be using it. Now this is a simple slide and release knot. You tie it and it will move easily up and down the main cord until it becomes under tension, where it will hold fast. And it really does hold well. It's a very, very useful knot for tarping, but also for camping generally as well, when you might need to add extra guys to your tent. Very, very simply, this cord has come down from the tarp. It's now gone round a peg, and this is the working end. So simply you place it over the top of your main cord. You go underneath and up between them once. Do the same again, so it's twice, like that. And now the third time, I usually put my finger there because it just leaves a hole. Go underneath, round the finger, so you go underneath both cords, and this time you put a loop, push a loop through where your finger was. Remember what I was saying earlier on about the slippery part? And then that is the knot there. Now I can slide that up and down the main guy. Let's move that back a bit, like that. And I can put a lot of tension on there. You can see the tension on that, and that is holding fast. And when it comes to release, nice and simply, you just pull the tail end and the whole thing just pops out and comes loose like that. So that is the slippery adjustable loop. Let me do it one more time, just try and make it a bit clearer if I can. So we've got the line here from the tarp. This is the working end. We place it over the top of the main cord, go underneath and back up the middle once, underneath, back up the middle twice, third time go underneath both and down through the hole there where my finger was, pull that tight, and there you have the guy cord, nice and tight, and that will hold there nice and steady under a lot of tension. And then to release, you just pull the slippery end and away it comes. It's as simple as that. Now the boolin
That's right, the bowline, not the bowline as it's written, is an old sailing knot, which used to run from the bow of the ship to the weather leach of a square sail, holding it steadfast in the wind, me hearties. Once again, a lot of these knots come from the sailing community, and that's because they work very, very well. They're quick to tie, and they are easy to untie even when they've been wet and placed under tension. And there's only two real knots that fall into that category. One is the bowline, and the other is the figure of 8 knot. You can put them both under an immense amount of tension and still undo them, whereas a lot of other knots, they're a real fiddle to get the tension out of them. Now, most people will recognise the bowline or bowline from their scouting days or junior days. So it's usually make a circle there. I think I'm trying to remember what my scouting days were. It was the rabbit comes up the hole. You can see it's crossed over the top of the cord there. The rabbit comes up the hole, round the tree, and back down the hole again. A lot of climbers use the bowline as well. And that's your bowline knot. And this knot can be put under an immense amount of tension, wet, whatever it may be, and it will still be easy to unpick. Now, the reason we use it for when we're tarping is very simple. It may be, for example, you have your tarp and you might be doing a quick setup and putting through there the tip of a walking pole or perhaps a stick, and you just quickly want to attach your guy cord to that without making it a permanent knot. It's very easy just to quickly do a bowline like that, drop it over the top like there, and then you peg that out, and that works a treat. It really depends on your needs. Some people leave their hanked cordage with a bowline on the end of it just for that reason, just so you can quickly put a walking pole through, drop that over, tie it down, and then when everything is looking taut, you can then change the knots should you wish to do so. But that really is the main use of a bowline when it comes to tarps, just simply to drop over something and obviously apply tension.
Okay, now the next two knots are important, obviously, for attaching the tarp to something nice and solid like a tree. I'll show you another configuration using walking poles a bit later on. As you can see, I've used the slippery clove hitch here to attach the cord to the tarp, and the hanked cordage is nice and neat there, so that when I'm ready to attach my tarp to the tree, I just pull the two loose ends and the whole thing just comes apart like that. So there's my length of cord. Now initially I'm just going to guess that the tarp needs to be a couple of feet away from the tree, and this is how we tie the first knot, which is the figure of 8 slippery hitch, and at the other end we're doing a taut line hitch which puts the tension into it. All this needs to be is a knot which holds it securely to the tree, is very, very fast to tie, and it's like so. So this is the working end, this is the live end. You put your hand underneath the live end, grab the working end, you bring it underneath the live end, twisting it once, and then lift your fingers so it's twisted twice. That's the figure of 8 being formed. You then put a loop through that from the working end and just pull it tight, and that then will hold onto the tree nicely like that. And that will stay with a lot of tension on it very, very nicely all night long. When you come to release it in the morning, you just take your working end, pull the working end, and the whole thing just pops apart like that. And then you can either hank the cordage back up to the tarp, like so, or you can obviously disconnect it from the tarp by pulling the working end on the slippery clove hitch. So there we go, quickly hank the cord back up again, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns should do it. Find the loop, push it through the loop, he says, like so, and then pull it taut, and there you are, it's back to being ready to be used for the next time. So now let's tie this knot one more time, and then we'll go down the other end and do the taut line hitch. So very, very quickly, I'm just guessing I've got the right amount of cord here attached to the tarp to put the tarp between the middle of the two trees. Let's just quickly do that figure of 8 slippery hitch again. So my hand goes under the end which is attached to the tarp here to the working end, like that. Grab the working end, take it underneath, twisting it once, and then lift my fingers, twisting it twice, and then through there goes a loop of cord from the working end. It could be as big as a loop as you like. There's the knot, and I'll just slide that round the tree so that's in line with the ridge line of the tarp. And now we'll go down to the following end, far end, and again I've got hanked cordage here ready to go, so I just pull the hanked cordage so that's out straight away. I'm guessing that's about right for a horizontal line. Obviously it's adjustable, and I'll just quickly tie the taut line hitch this end. As you can see, it's quite a tight ridge, not it too tight in case it splits the stitching, but tight enough certainly that it's going to keep the weather off you. And then very quickly that is tied like so. And then we'd normally peg out the sides of the A-frame, which we'll show you a bit later on. But let's come and have a look at this knot in close-up. Right, so let's look at that knot again in close-up. I'll just quickly release it there. So, there's the cord coming from the tarp, which obviously you can only pull to a certain tension. You don't want to put too much weight on that as you tie this knot. Bring it round your object, your tree or your pole. Bring it underneath and then over the live end. Now this is where you apply the tension. By pulling the cord this way, it obviously puts tension on the main cord there. And once that's round, basically now the rest of the knot is locking it so it doesn't slip. The way you do that is you bring the working end round underneath, creating a loop like so. You bring the loop down through that hole there. My fingers are in the way, I'm sorry about this. Like so, he says. There you go. Down through, so there's that loop through there. And now what we need to do is lock that loop. And you do that by creating another loop here with the working end, putting it through there, and then pulling that taut so that it locks the knot there. And that knot, although it's got a loop on it and a loose end, is holding the tension for the tarp, and that'll hold lovely all night long. To release in the morning, you just pull the working end. So I'll do that again. So you just pull the working end like that, and the whole thing just pops apart and the tension comes out of it. So one more time. You've got the cord round the tree. He says, let's put it there. Round the tree, underneath, over the top, pull on it to give the cord tension. Bring it round. As you do so, create a loop like that in the working end. Bring the loop up and over and down through that section there, and then create another loop with a working end. Put that through the first loop, and then pull the loose end taut like that, and that will just hold it in place nicely. And there's your nice taut line hitch. And that is the best way I found to tie up a A-frame, typical A-frame tarp to two trees. So we've looked at the 6 basic knots you need now to pitch the tarp, and also how to hank cordage, keep things nice and neat in the camp. I've got a bag full of tarps here of all different shapes and sizes, and it's a beautiful day, so we're going to go for a walk and I'll show you the 3 basic configurations on how to pitch the tarp. Come and join me. The A-frame is the traditional shape that most people associate with tarps, thanks to Ray Mears and the bushcraft community, and probably the number of times you've seen pictures of tarps in use. And we're going to set one up now to show you how easy it is to set that configuration up. We've got here 2 lovely solid trees in an ancient woodland. It's a very, very calm evening. There's no wind at all, so it's highly unlikely that the tarp would flap and disturb us during the night. Also, there's very little above us to fall on us and cause us any problems, and I very much doubt it's going to rain, but we're going to set it up out of principle anyway. So I've got an old 8 foot by 6 foot tarp here, which is plenty big enough for one person. I've already connected the 2 cords at the apex of each end, and I've got 4 cords at each corner. And what I'm going to do is tie the tarp so it starts off about this height, and then when the corners come into play and it pulls the tension down, the tarp will probably come to about here, which would be plenty to allow access from all areas, lots of ventilation and fabulous views. So let's start with the first one, the apex, which of course is the figure of 8 slippery hitch, which we touched on earlier on, and just quickly get that into practice. That's that bit done, and let's go down the other end for a taut line hitch. Obviously it's all hanked cordage, which makes life a lot easier to sort out. Try and get that as level as we can.
anything, this cord is slightly a bit too long this end. And then we got the loop, and then the second loop goes through the first loop to lock it, like so. There's a bit of cord there that's hanging down. To be honest, I probably would just quickly hank that to get it out of the way and stop it dripping all night long if it was to rain or something. So just quickly hank that and get that sorted. Like to have a nice tidy camp if we can, because if you need to move during the night and it's pouring with rain, the weather turns against you, there's nothing worse than trying to sort out mess. So there we have, there's the ridge line. Right, let's do the corners. Now, the secret with pitching your tarp correctly, fairly swiftly, is all to do with angles. And probably the A-frame is the one where it becomes most obvious that you've got to get your 45 degrees to the ridge line and all this sort of stuff. And it starts to become clear fairly quickly. Otherwise the actual whole profile of the tarp starts to lose shape very, very quickly. So there's the guy knot done this side. I'll just do exactly the same the other side to start making the A-frame take shape. The spot we've chosen here for this example is quite a nice woodland area. There's a gentle slope to the ground, but the bit underneath the tarp would make for a very comfortable night's sleep because there's plenty of moss on the ground and there's not much by the way of breeze. You can see there the A-frame has started already. Now we'll do the two guys nearest that end. There's the camera. On mossy ground like this, it's important to get the peg in as deeply as you can. And let's get the guy knot done once, twice, and all the way around, back up through the hole for the third time. There's a nice guy knot, put some tension on the tarp, and now we'll do the final corner, and then we'll just fiddle with it a bit just to make sure it's nice and taut. So let's go over here, pull this lovely hanked cordage. As there's a bit of a slope, this is a longer guy. Somewhere there would do nicely. The great thing about this guy knot is you can tie it with all sort of loose ends, so you can have it be very, really short or it could be as long as you like. As long as you can actually whip it through the cord, it's easily done, and then you just leave it ready for a quick release in the morning. That's nice. Okay, so a quick pull on a couple of guys to balance it off and we've got it finished. Fantastic. And there we have it, a lovely A-frame configuration ready for a night of pleasure. We've got plenty of ventilation, as you can see, there's plenty of space either side. We can get into under the tarp from any angle. I've got plenty of space here to prepare myself, sort my gear out. I've got plenty of space to cook, lots of ventilation with regards to safety point of view. If the wind does pick up and a little bit more tension is needed on the tarp, there's extra tabs either side here, and I can just tab those down and keep the tarp under lots of attention. But as you can see on a night like this, an evening like this, it's very, very mild, so this would do fine all night long. And I've got the best possible view in the world, the best entertainment, watching the local wildlife perform in the wood. Now, certain times you might want to do the A-frame using walking poles. And there is a technique for this. The technique is basically to start with the walking pole at both ends, reduced to its minimum extension, and then peg the corners of the A-frame into the ground, and then each corner attach the guy and slowly extend one guy at a time and then lift the poles up. It's a simple technique which does keep the stability of the A-frame at its maximum at all times, and it allows you then to drop one end of the A-frame to allow for inclement weather and so on should you need to during the night. So that's the A-frame. Now let's go and have a look at the lean-to. The lean-to configuration is quite a useful one. Where the A-frame succeeds in keeping the weather that's coming directly down off you. The lean-to configuration and later the flying V configuration protects you from wind coming from a particular direction or weather coming from a particular direction. It's also a nice useful configuration if you've got something like a small tarp and you add it to your camping selection outside your tent. It'll give you a greater area to cook and relax under. We're going to use the Backpacking Light micro tarp on this one. It's interesting that it takes quite a few pegs, this particular configuration. We're probably going to use 7 or 8 pegs. And we're going to use a couple of walking poles, and then to pick the lifter up at the end, we've just picked a stick up here that will act as a lifter. But we could have obviously used the stick as well to do the main supports. So let's peg this down and get on with this. The main principle basically is to peg the back of the tarp down first to the ground and then work outwards from that. And as you work outwards, although the guys are set at a certain angle to get the tension in it, you then readjust the guys and it all then takes shape correctly, which I hope you'll see as we do this. Okay, so let's peg the back of the tarp down because we're assuming that the weather is behind me going that way, and we obviously want to protect ourselves from the weather, whatever it might be. Now with a lean-to, the main secret to its configuration is to conform it so that it has a bit of a drip on the front, which is a little dip down to stop the weather coming completely into the tarp. Makes a big difference even though it's a small drip. And what we're going to do is use the 2 poles and prop them up either side. We've got bowlines on the end of some short cord already, and then we'll just drop the bowline straight over the top of the point of the pole, which we'll do now. The lean-to, like most tarp configurations, takes a few moments to set up. The Flying V being the fastest, but there's no point rushing it. You can take your time and enjoy the pleasure of the moment of actually putting the tarp up, because it isn't like a tent where there's just one way of doing it and it's correct straight away. You have to get it so it suits your mood. You have to understand the weather, the mood of how you want it, and you want it so you can adjust it as well. So this is just a temporary guy that I'm putting in here at this angle, sort of 45 degrees to the opposite peg that's down there. I'll do the same on the other side there. And initially this will not look particularly good, but do not fret. There's the main part of the back. Drop the bowline over the top of the walking pole, and as I say, peg this out sort of 45 degrees just temporarily until the tarp is ready for its final tension. So put the guy knot on there, and that's through there, and that'll do that for the moment. Okay, so it doesn't look particularly good at the moment, admittedly, but you can see the drip effect here. And on the Backpacking Light tarps, we've designed it so there's just a short way back to allow for this drip, which does stop an awful lot of weather coming in. So now we do the front guys. These initially we peg out at right angles to the tarp, and then once again we move them in the final adjustment so it takes a really good shape. And likewise over here. Again, it's still not looking particularly good, but it won't be long before it really takes shape. Now the ridge line is sagging across the middle of the tarp there, which you can see. And the way we get rid of that, there you go, is to now bring these guys on the poles round to 90 degrees to the tarp. We'll put some main tension in those in a second, but I'm just putting them in place now to give the ridge line some tension, like so. And these pegs and guys and poles are in a dead straight line with each other. But as you can see, that's a bit loose. And the reason that's loose is this guy has got to come round to 45 degrees, and the same for that one. So we do the same thing here. So, And the same here, like so. And that's not too bad. Not too bad at all. A little bit more tension there. Is that tension? There we go. Now that's not bad. Bit of a ripple here which just needs to be adjusted with a peg there. Now that's not a bad shaped lean-to. Obviously we're lying out that way, one side or the other, which allows us the space to cook and prepare. But in these particular tarps, what we've done is we've designed a lifter at the back which pulls the centre area backwards, giving you a lot more headroom inside. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull that back using a slippery hitch to attach the cord to the tarp, a clove hitch over the top of the stick, and then the usual guy knot to hold the stick and give it some tension. And then we'll lie out the bivvy bag and you can see it all in its final glory. And I've attached the stick as a lifter there to the lifter in the centre of the tarp, as you can see. Putting the tension under it now. A clove hitch at the top there, obviously the guy knot here, peg down there, and now that gives us a considerable amount of headroom inside. I'll just tighten up the other guys and then I'm ready for some supper, I think. So here we are, a lovely lean-to setup. As you saw, it didn't take too long to actually do. Plenty of tension in the poles, you can see, plenty of tension in the material, and should it go really wild during the night, there's obviously extra tab points there to attach more guys to. The lean-to configuration's quite a useful one in the sense that this drip that formed at the front of the shape is actually quite important because it does stop an incredible amount of weather coming in at you, whichever direction it's flowing from. And once again, with the lifter at the back here, gives me plenty of space, even a big guy like me, I'm 6'2", to actually pull my top off and change, while the rest of me is inside my waterproof bag down here. As you can see, I've got plenty of space either side for storage, my boots, my rucksack, and obviously to set my, my cooker up. Another useful configuration for the lean-to would be if you've got a small tent perhaps and you want an awning, just by using a small tarp like this and a couple of walking poles which you've probably got with you, you can create an awning that comes out the front of your tent in some direction and gives you more space for cooking, relaxing, whatever it may be. So that's the lean-to, that's the basic configuration of the lean-to. All the configurations that we're showing you are adaptable. We're just giving you the 3 basic configurations, and then at the end of the video I'll show you a couple of ideas of different ways that you can actually set up a basic configuration and change it to make it specific for your needs depending on the weather. Of the 3 configurations, the Flying V is by far the easiest and the fastest one to put up. And all you need is a solid support, i.e. one tree. It can be a walking pole, but in this case, because this is a big tarp, we're going to use the tree. This tarp is the Go Light Tarp 2, so it's a 10 foot by 8 foot tarp which has got huge amount of space underneath it, and you just need 3 pegs. If the wind's really heavy, then obviously you'd need more stability, but in this case 3 pegs is fine. The wind is from behind me, so it's a perfect situation, a perfect example. Basically we're going to create the shelter here, be trapped away from the wind, and we're going to get lots of space underneath it. So let's just go ahead and do that. As usual, I've already tied my cord to the corner of the tarp using the slippery hitch, and I've hanked the cordage, as you can see. As this is a big tarp, I need to tie this fairly high up, so I'll use the figure-of-8 slippery hitch to attach it to the tree. I then peg out the opposite corner, which is somewhere under all this material, which is here, like so. And then you literally just peg out the other 2 remaining corners to get your Flying V or Flying Diamond shape, like so. See the wind there coming across, and very, very quickly you've got yourself into a situation. You have plenty of shelter out of the rain or the sunshine or whatever it might be, where you can relax or cook or whatever. And as you can see, there's lots of flappy material because this is a very, very big tarp. So what some people do is they take a walking pole, adjust the walking pole, stick it in the ground, and obviously point it at an angle where there's some sort of tension going on here, and allows you a lot more headroom underneath the tarp. But as good as this system is, it can sometimes slip, so you have to accept that you'll be probably spending the night pushing the pole back up again. Or you have a tarp which has got lifters on the outside of the tarp. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the Backpacking Light micro tarp, which is for use in association with a bivvy bag, and I'll show you how to use the lifters to lift the tarp up and give you a little bit more headroom, which is much more stable than this. Well, that large 10x8 tarp behind me here, you can see, covers an enormous area, and it's protection for 2-3 people, camping gear, a kayak, push bikes, whatever. You can use your imagination. But we're going to do a smaller version now using the Backpacking Light micro tarp, which, as you can see, is very, very tiny. And we use 2 cords, 5 pegs and 2 supports. In this case we're going to use 2 lightweight walking poles, but you could equally use sticks or even a tree as one of the main supports. And we're going to set this out here right in front of me, and you can compare the two and see which one suits your needs. The key difference with setting up the micro tarp compared to setting up the larger one there is, you notice I tied the tarp to the tree first and then laid out the pegs. As this is a bit smaller, it actually works out a lot easier to do it by setting the tarp up first in a rough triangular form, attaching the pole and then adjusting it to give it the right tension. So I've done the first corner, whereas last time the next thing I did was put the diagonal in. I'm actually just going to do the 2 sides and adjust it to suit, each time holding up the diagonal to see where it's going to sit in its final configuration, which is somewhere around there. This flying V configuration is incredibly useful in association with a bivvy bag, as hopefully you'll see. Now, I've tied the cord once again using a slippery hitch to the tarp. I've hanged the cordage, that all comes apart, and like last time, what I'm going to do is show you the clove hitch, which was twist once to the left, twist twice to the left, put the second one underneath the first one, and then slide the handle of the walking pole through those loops. There's your clove hitch, and that's not going to move. And that's our upright support. Now, it may look slightly messy, but just give me a few minutes and we'll have this sorted. And then we put in the pegs for the guy, which obviously is in a direct line with the far end. That goes right in there, and then we use the guy knot, which is over the top, through the gap once, through the gap twice, and then make a loop with your finger there, through the gap, underneath both cords, and then back through that loop there, and there's the tension in the tarp, which doesn't look too bad first attempt. But as you can see straight away, with something like this, we have a limited amount of headroom underneath the tarp with our bivvies. So let's just pop that there. Let's just grab a bivvy bag, which is just over here. Pop that in. And the idea is that you'd sleep underneath there with the rest of your body out. So you've got plenty of ventilation, plenty of protection from the wind, and you've got all the elements covered. But however, as you'll obviously notice straight away, you haven't got much in the way of headroom. So hence the reason you use these lifters. And what we're going to do is attach a cord to the central lifter here, extend the pole so the pole's up here, which could be a stick as I say before, and then peg that back out over there, and that will then give us considerably more headroom underneath the tarp. And I'll get underneath it in a second and you'll see exactly how much room I've got. With the cord now attached to the lifter in the centre of the tarp, I put a clove hitch and attach it to the pole, once to the left, twice to the left, the second one underneath the first, and then that goes over the head of the pole there. So that then locks that in place. And then we just need to peg out the back of the pole to give the tarp the complete tension and maximum headroom inside. So that's pegged it in, then the guy knot, once over the top, twice over the top, and up through the middle, that is, and then the third one is underneath both of them, round, and then down through the hole with just a loop, and there's the knot there. And by pulling that tight, you can see that the tarp could just do with the base of the pole being more in line to get the tension done up, which is nice there. And even if there's a breeze during the night and that's moving around, it's not going to go anywhere, it's just going to flap like this and actually doesn't cause any problems whatsoever, which makes it a very, very useful feature. So that's using the lifter. I'll get under the tarp now and we can see exactly how much headroom we've got. And this is my favourite configuration, a simple flying V using 5 pegs. I've got enough space here to pack all my gear. I've got enough space here to do some cooking. I've got a fabulous view. It's simple, it's easy. The area that it covers is enough to keep my torso dry so I can change clothes and put things on and off without too much of an issue. If it's pouring with rain, then the bivy bag, which is waterproof, is protecting my legs. So why bother covering it? For me, this is lightweight backpacking at its best. But of course, if you go with friends, you might want to take the Go Light tarp with you. But at least you can get coverage then for 2 or 3 people for minimum weight, and you can have a really good party.
This is another personal favourite of mine, which uses the Backpacking Light Solo Tarp, initially set up as a flying V on a tree or pole. The general advice is that a tarp should be 3 foot or a metre longer than your height to allow for maximum protection on more than one side. As you can see here, 2 walking poles have been attached to the lifters, which create excellent headroom underneath. This configuration will take some serious punishment from the weather, and if the tension is set right, it will hardly flap in the wind and give you a good night's sleep. Another variation of the lean-to places the supports not at the corners of the tarp but on the next tab in. This allows both sides to be brought quite low and once again provides great protection on 3 sides. Of course, unlike the previous setup, you will be sleeping with only your torso under the cover, with the bottom half of your bivy bag exposed. You'll notice too, the back corners of the tarp are not pegged out but tucked underneath. Taking that shape a bit further, you can add or drop and raise poles to explore ideas to suit your needs. And that brings us to the end of this video, which I hope has convinced you that using a tarp is fun, flexible and safe for most weather conditions.
Hello and welcome to the Backpacking Light tarp video. Now, using a tarp is great fun. They're very, very simple. They give you considerably more weight.
Not quite, they don't.
Hello and welcome to the Backpacking Light tarp video. Now, using a tarp is great fun, particularly obviously in the outdoors. You're not going to use it in the house, are you? Stupid thing to say. Well, what we've done in this video is we've tried to show you the 3 main configurations to get the most. The A-frame and the lean-to. Now let's go over and have a look at the, I've forgotten what it's called. It's called the Flying V. Like that. And I've got plenty of space down here and plenty of space behind me. Now with the lean-to configuration, I can lie long ways, I can lie with my feet out, I could lie, how else could I lie actually? Around the back here. I've also got plenty of space behind me for my rucksack, bits and bobs, and obviously my cooking gear here, cooking beer. So there you are, that's the 6 basic knots on, peg that down too. In this case, we've got the Backpacking Light micro tarp, which has been designed, I thought the pole would fall over, to the pole. And if this isn't quite right, we'll adjust it in a second. We're aiming to the pole there to be... Can I cut in anywhere?